Have you ever found yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you? The kind of questions that keep you up at night, wondering if the trust you built over years was nothing more than an illusion. This story is not just about betrayal. It's about the pain of discovery, the courage to stand up for what's right, and the strength to rebuild from the ashes. A father. A son. And a truth that shattered everything. Welcome to Wild Love Story, where we bring you the most gripping, true relationship tales that will leave you questioning everything about love, loyalty, and trust. Today's story. It's one for the books. This story begins with a loving family, a husband, a wife, and their 12-year-old son. Life seemed normal, almost perfect. But what happens when the very foundation of a family is shaken by a truth so unexpected, so devastating, that it changes their lives forever? Stay with us, as we unravel a tale of betrayal exposed by the innocence of a child, the heartbreak of a father, and a quest for justice that will leave you speechless. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of what's to come. If you're ready for a story that's raw, emotional, and unforgettable, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is Wild Love Story, and today's journey is one you won't soon forget. My name is Daniel. I had been married to Selena for 15 years. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had a way of lighting up every room she walked into. Together, we had built what I thought was a solid life. We shared a cozy home, filled with laughter, love, and memories. But above all, we had our son, Ethan, our pride and joy. Ethan was 12 years old at the time, curious and sharp as a tack. He adored his mom, often joking that she was his superhero, and the two of them had an incredible bond. For me, there was no greater joy than watching them together. It felt like we were the kind of family you'd see in a holiday card. Perfect. Complete. Our days were simple but fulfilling. Weekends were spent at Ethan's soccer games, followed by family dinners where we'd all laugh until our sides hurt. Selena had a way of telling stories that could make anyone smile, and Ethan would hang on her every word, his eyes full of admiration. I loved those moments that made me feel like the luckiest man in the world. At night, after Ethan was asleep, Selena and I would sit on the porch, talking about everything and nothing at all. I'd tell her about work, and she'd share updates on her latest project at the nonprofit she worked for. She was passionate about helping others, and I admired that about her. She wasn't just my wife, she was my best friend. Or so I thought. Selena often told me how proud she was of the life we'd built together. She'd say, "Daniel, we've got it all, don't we?" And I believed her. I believed every word, because in my heart, it felt true. We had a home filled with love, a son who brought us endless joy, and a marriage I thought was built on trust. It was everything I'd ever dreamed of. Everything I thought would last forever. But looking back now, I realized there were moments, small, fleeting moments, that didn't quite add up. A glance too quickly averted, a phone call she'd step outside to take, or the occasional late night at work that left me alone at the dinner table. At the time, I brushed them off. After all, who doesn't have a few bumps in a long marriage? Selena always reassured me, and I trusted her completely. Trust. It's such a simple word, isn't it? We throw it around so easily, believing it's the foundation of every good relationship. And for a long time, I thought our trust was unshakable. Selena had been by my side through thick and thin, my partner, my confidant, my everything. And yet, trust can be fragile. It can shatter in an instant. In those days, I had no reason to doubt her. Life was good, and I was happy. Ethan was thriving, Selena seemed content, and I felt like the luckiest man alive. If someone had told me back then that my entire world would soon come crashing down, would have laughed. Because in my eyes, we were untouchable. Our family was untouchable. But as I would soon learn, appearances can be deceiving. And even the strongest bonds can hide cracks deep beneath the surface. cracks that you don't see until it's too late. But at the time, my world still felt intact. I remember a particular evening. It was just an ordinary Wednesday. Ethan was in his room, working on a school project, and Selena was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. It was moments like these that I cherished. The simple, quiet evenings that made me feel like I had everything I could ever need. Selena had a way of making even the mundane feel special. She'd always add a little extra effort, lighting a candle at the dinner table, plating the food like it was for a five-star restaurant. That night, she brought out a dish I'd mentioned craving weeks ago. I remembered, she said with a smile, and my heart warmed. I thought to myself, how lucky am I to have a partner who listens, who cares. As we ate, Ethan excitedly shared details about his science project, his hands gesturing wildly as he explained how he was building a miniature volcano. Selena and I exchanged amused glances, the kind parents share when their child's enthusiasm lights up the room. We laughed together, the three of us, and in that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. After dinner, Ethan asked if I could help him with his project. Selena smiled and said, "I'll clean up. You two have fun." And that's what we did. For the next hour, Ethan and I worked side by side, laughing as we struggled to get the lava mixture just right. When we finally got it to work, his face lit up with pride. It was the kind of father-son bonding moment I'll never forget. Later that night, after Ethan had gone to bed, Selena and I found ourselves back on the porch. She sipped her tea while I nursed a glass of wine, and we talked about the little things: work, Ethan's upcoming soccer game, plans for the weekend. It was one of those easy, comfortable conversations that remind you why you fell in love in the first place. I looked at her and thought, this is my person. This is my forever. But sometimes, it's in the quiet moments, when everything feels perfect, that the smallest details begin to stand out. I noticed she kept glancing at her phone, her fingers tapping out quick responses to someone. I didn't think much of it at first. She was always busy coordinating things for her nonprofit. But for some reason, that night, it stuck in my mind. The following morning, as we went about our usual routine, the thought was still there, nagging at the back of my mind. Selena kissed me on the cheek as she left for work, her scent lingering in the air, and I told myself I was being silly. I trusted her. She'd never given me a reason not to. But trust isn't just about the big things, is it? It's built, or broken, in the little moments. The glances, the pauses, the unexplained absences. And even though I told myself everything was fine, a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. A feeling I pushed aside, because who wants to believe their perfect life might not be so perfect after all? In hindsight, maybe I should have paid closer attention. Maybe I should have asked more questions, been more observant. But at the time, I was content to live in the comfort of denial. After all, why look for cracks when the surface still looks flawless? That was the last truly happy evening I can remember. Because not long after, the cracks in our seemingly perfect life would start to widen. And when they finally gave way, the truth that emerged would leave me questioning everything I thought I knew about the woman I loved and the family we had built together. It began subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a faint whisper in the back of my mind. Selena's late nights at work started becoming more frequent, her phone never far from her hand. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were both busy people with demanding schedules. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that something was different. Selena had always been attentive, present, engaged. But lately, there was a distance, a quiet shift that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She seemed distracted, her responses shorter, her laughter less frequent. Even Ethan noticed. One evening, as we were watching TV, he turned to me and said, "Mom doesn't watch with us anymore. She's always on her phone." I brushed it off, telling him she was just busy, but deep down, his words lingered. It wasn't just her phone, though. It was the little things. The way she'd excuse herself to take calls in the other room, how her once transparent schedule now had unexplained gaps. Just running errands, she'd say with a smile that felt a little too forced. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to question her. After all, we'd been together for 15 years. What reason could she possibly have to hide anything from me? But the doubt started creeping in, slowly chipping away at the trust one had always taken for granted. One night, as I was clearing the table after dinner, I noticed her phone buzzing on the counter. She glanced at it, hesitated for a moment, and then turned it face down without answering. "Work stuff," she said casually, but her tone didn't match the ease of her words. For the first time, I felt a knot form in my stomach. Over the next few days, I tried to shake the feeling, to convince myself I was imagining things. But the signs were becoming harder to ignore. Selena had always been a creature of habit, predictable in the best way. I could set my watch to her morning routine, her coffee order, her favorite show at the end of a long day. But now, those routines were changing. She was leaving earlier, coming home later, and when she did, she seemed preoccupied. One evening, Ethan approached me with an innocent question that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad, why does Mom text Uncle Mike so much?" Uncle Mike. He wasn't actually her uncle, of course, just an old family friend she'd known for years. He'd always been polite, charming even, but we weren't particularly close. Selena and I had joked about his quirks in the past, never taking him too seriously. But now, hearing Ethan's words, my heart skipped a beat. I tried to act nonchalant. "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing," I told Ethan. But my mind was racing. Uncle Mike? What could they possibly have to talk about so frequently? And why hadn't Selena mentioned it to me? I couldn't shake the unease that was quickly growing into something I could no longer ignore. That night, as Selena sat in bed scrolling through her phone, I found myself watching her, searching for answers in her face. She seemed calm, even cheerful, as she tapped away, occasionally chuckling at something on the screen. I wanted to ask her, to confront her, but the words caught in my throat. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head? The fear of what I might uncover was enough to keep me silent. But silence only made the doubts louder. I started noticing patterns I had overlooked before. The way she'd step out of the room when her phone rang, how she suddenly had more work trips that required her to be away overnight. And then there were the texts, quick replies, often accompanied by a faint smile she didn't realize I could see. Every little action seemed to add to the weight pressing on my chest. Ethan, in his innocent way, kept pointing out things I hadn't noticed. "Mom's been gone a lot lately," he said one afternoon. I nodded, trying to reassure him, and myself. "She's just busy with work, buddy. It's nothing to worry about." But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them anymore. Still, I didn't want to accuse her without proof. Selena had given me 15 years of marriage, and I owed her the benefit of the doubt. But the tension between what I felt and what I wanted to believe was tearing me apart. I decided I needed answers, not assumptions, not guesses, but answers. And though I didn't know it at the time, those answers would come sooner than I expected, in a way I never could have imagined. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't wait for you to find it. Sometimes, it comes crashing into your life, leaving no room for denial or doubt. And when it does, nothing is ever the same again. The truth has a way of finding you, even when you're not ready for it. For me, it came late one evening, delivered by the person I least expected, my son, Ethan. It was a quiet night. Selena had gone out, claiming she needed to meet a colleague for a work-related dinner. She left in a hurry, her phone tucked securely in her purse, and I told myself not to overthink it. Ethan and I stayed home, eating pizza and watching his favorite movie. I tried to focus on the moment, to push the growing doubts out of my mind. But then Ethan said something that stopped me cold. "Dad, I found something on Mom's tablet," he said, his voice hesitant. I turned to him, confused. What do you mean? He hesitated for a moment, then got up and brought me Selena's old tablet. She let me use it for homework, he explained, but I saw some messages. I wasn't trying to snoop, I swear. I just thought, you should see them. My heart raced as I took the tablet from his hands. I didn't know what to expect, but the look on Ethan's face told me it wasn't good. He sat beside me as I unlocked the screen, scrolling through the apps until I found the messages. At first, they seemed innocent enough, quick exchanges about plans and updates. But then I saw the name. Mike. My breath caught in my throat as I opened the thread. The messages weren't work-related. They were personal, intimate. Flirty texts, inside jokes, and photos. My hands shook as I scrolled further, each message like a punch to the gut. I can't wait to see you again. Last night was amazing. And then, the one that confirmed everything, a photo of the two of them together, smiling in a way that left no room for doubt. Ethan's voice broke the silence. Dad, is Mom. He didn't finish the sentence, and he didn't need to. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was stare at the screen, the weight of what I was seeing crashing down on me like a tidal wave. Selena, the woman I had loved, trusted, built a life with, was cheating on me. And my son, my sweet, innocent Ethan, had been the one to uncover it. I wanted to protect him, to shield him from the pain I was feeling, but it was too late for that. He had already seen too much. It's going to be okay, I told him, though I wasn't sure I believed it. We'll figure this out. But even as I said the words, I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. That night, I waited for Selena to come home. I sat on the couch, the tablet still in my hands, my mind racing with questions. Why? How long? Did she ever love me, or was it all a lie? The hours dragged on, and when I finally heard the sound of her keys in the door, my heart was pounding. Selena walked in, her face lighting up when she saw me. You're still up? She asked, her voice cheerful. I looked at her, trying to find some trace of the woman I thought I knew. We need to talk, I said, my voice barely steady. Her smile faltered. What's wrong? She asked, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, fear, maybe. Guilt. I held up the tablet, the messages open on the screen. Explain this, I said, my voice breaking. Selena's face went pale. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at the screen like it might somehow disappear. And then, she started to speak. Her words came out in a rush, excuses, justifications, denials. It's not what it looks like, she said. Mike and I are just friends. But I wasn't buying it. Not after what I had seen. Friends? I asked, my voice rising. Friends don't send each other messages like this. Friends don't spend the night together. She tried to interrupt, but I wasn't done. You've been lying to me. To us. Do you even realize what this has done to Ethan? At the mention of Ethan's name, her expression changed. For the first time, I saw a flicker of regret, or maybe just fear of being caught. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. I love you. I love our family. But the words felt hollow, empty, like an echo of something that had once been real. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was all some horrible misunderstanding, that we could fix it and move forward. But the evidence was right there in front of me, undeniable and devastating. The life we had built together, the trust one had placed in her, it was all gone. For the first time in 15 years, I looked at Selena and realized I didn't know her at all. The woman standing in front of me, pleading for forgiveness, wasn't the person I thought I had married. And as much as it hurt to admit, I knew there was no going back from this. The truth had come crashing in, and with it, everything I thought I knew about my marriage. There was no escaping it now. The only question was what I was going to do next. My mind was a storm of emotions: anger, betrayal, heartbreak. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss, and I didn't know how to take the next step. But one thing was clear: I couldn't let this go unanswered. The silence in the room was suffocating as Selena stood there, her face streaked with tears. "Daniel, please," she said, her voice trembling. "I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to end like this." Her words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper into the trust we had built over 15 years. I wanted to yell, to scream, to ask her how she could do this to me, to Ethan. But when I finally spoke, my voice was calm, too calm. "A mistake," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "This isn't a mistake, Selena. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. This is a choice. A deliberate choice to betray me, to betray our family." I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it didn't make me feel any better. If anything, it made me angrier. "How long?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. "How long has this been going on?" Selena hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "A few months," she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "A few months." The words echoed in my mind, each syllable like a blow to my chest. All those late nights, the missed dinners, the secretive phone calls, it all made sense now. And yet, the weight of her confession didn't feel like clarity. It felt like devastation. "Did you ever think about us?" I asked, my voice breaking. "About what this would do to our son?" "To me?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said. "I was just. I don't know. I was lost." Her words felt hollow, like an excuse rather than an explanation. "Lost?" I repeated, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You weren't lost, Selena. You were selfish." That's when Ethan appeared in the doorway, his small frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. "Dad?" he said softly, his voice full of uncertainty. I turned to him, my heart breaking all over again. "It's okay, buddy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Go back to bed. We'll talk in the morning." But he didn't move. Instead, he looked at Selena, his eyes filled with confusion and hurt. "Why are you making Dad sad?" he asked her. Selena froze, her tears flowing freely now. "Ethan, sweetie, it's not what you think," she began, but Ethan shook his head. "I saw the messages, Mom," he said quietly. "I know." His words hit her like a physical blow, and for a moment, no one spoke. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of Selena's choked sobs. I wanted to shield him from this, to protect him from the pain I was feeling, but it was too late. He had already seen too much. After a long, agonizing pause, Selena turned to me. "Daniel, please," she said, her voice desperate. "Let's talk about this, just the two of us. We can fix this." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Fix this?" I repeated. "How do you fix something like this, Selena? How do you rebuild trust after it's been completely destroyed?" I shook my head, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. "I don't even know who you are anymore." Ethan finally turned and walked back to his room, his small shoulders slumped in defeat. I wanted to follow him, to hold him and tell him everything would be okay, but I couldn't leave this unfinished. I turned back to Selena, my anger giving way to exhaustion. "You need to leave," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes widened in shock. "What?" "No, Daniel, please. This is my home too." But I didn't budge. "I can't do this right now," I told her. "I need space. Ethan needs space. Go stay with a friend, with Mike, for all I care. But you're not staying here tonight." Her face crumpled as she realized I wasn't going to back down. She tried to argue, to plead with me, but I was done listening. "Pack a bag," I said firmly. "And go." It felt like hours before she finally left, the sound of her car pulling out of the driveway echoing in the quiet night. I sat alone in the living room, the weight of everything crashing down on me. The house felt unbearably empty, even with Ethan sleeping just down the hall. I wanted to cry, to scream, to do something, anything, to release the pain I was feeling. But all I could do was sit there, numb. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the couch, replaying every moment of our marriage in my mind, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. Was it me? Did I miss the signs? Could I have done something differently? The questions were endless, and the answers were nowhere to be found. All I knew was that nothing would ever be the same. The fallout had begun, and I knew the road ahead would be long and painful. But as I sat there in the silence, one thing became clear: I couldn't let this break me. Not for my sake, and certainly not for Ethan's. If Selena had chosen to betray our family, then it was up to me to protect what was left of it. But I knew that protecting Ethan and myself wasn't enough. I needed closure. I needed justice. And above all, I needed Selena to face the consequences of her actions. That night, as I sat in the silence of our empty living room, I made a decision: I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. Revenge wasn't something I ever thought I'd consider. I'd always believed in taking the high road, in letting karma do its work. But this felt different. This wasn't just about me, it was about Ethan, about the family she had destroyed. And as I replayed everything in my mind, the lies, the betrayal, the pain she had caused, I realized that I couldn't just let it go. My first step was to gather evidence. I didn't want to rely solely on what Ethan had found on her tablet. I needed more, something undeniable, something that would hold up in court if it came to that. So, over the next few days, I started paying closer attention. I checked our phone bill, looking for repeated calls or texts to Mike's number. It didn't take long to find a pattern: late-night calls, texts during work hours, even messages while we were sitting at the dinner table. Next, I reached out to a trusted friend, someone I knew I could count on to keep this quiet. Mark was a private investigator I had met years ago through work, and if anyone could help me, it was him. When I explained the situation, he didn't hesitate. "I'll get you what you need," he said, and I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. Mark's investigation confirmed what I already knew but added details that made my stomach turn. He followed Selena and Mike, capturing photos and video evidence of their meetings. They weren't exactly discreet: dinners, walks in the park, even a weekend getaway when she had told me she was at a work retreat. The betrayal was more brazen than I had imagined, and each piece of evidence felt like another dagger in my heart. Armed with everything I needed, I began to plan my next move. This wasn't going to be a messy, emotional outburst. It was going to be calculated, deliberate, and final. I wasn't just going to confront her, I was going to ensure that she felt the full weight of her actions. But more importantly, I was going to protect Ethan and secure our future. My first priority was the divorce. I consulted a lawyer, laying out everything I had: Selena's infidelity, the financial strain her deceit had caused, and the emotional toll it had taken on Ethan. My lawyer assured me that with the evidence I had, the court would likely rule in my favor, granting me full custody and a significant portion of our shared assets. It wasn't just about money, it was about ensuring that Ethan and I could move forward without her looming over us. But I didn't stop there. Selena had always been proud of her reputation, at work, in our community, among her friends. She had built an image of herself as a dedicated wife, a loving mother, and a passionate advocate for her nonprofit. I knew that image was her Achilles heel, and I wasn't above exposing the truth. With Mark's help, I compiled a detailed account of her affair, complete with photos, dates, and messages. It wasn't malicious, it was justice. At first, I struggled with whether or not to release the information. Part of me worried about how it would affect Ethan, about whether it was the right thing to do. But then I thought about all the lies, the deceit, the pain she had caused. Selena had made her choices, and now it was time for her to face the consequences. The truth wasn't just mine to hold, it belonged to everyone she had deceived. I started small, sharing the evidence with a few close friends, people I knew would support me and help spread the word if necessary. Their reactions were a mix of shock and anger. "How could she do this to you?" one of them asked. "You and Ethan deserve so much better." Their support gave me the strength to keep going, to see my plan through to the end. The final piece of my plan was confronting Selena. But this time, it wasn't going to be an emotional exchange in the heat of the moment. It was going to be on my terms, with everything laid out in front of her. I wanted her to see the full extent of her actions, to understand that this wasn't just about me, it was about the family she had torn apart. I waited until Ethan was at school, ensuring he wouldn't have to witness what was about to happen. When Selena arrived home, I was ready. I had the evidence spread out on the dining table, photos, messages, phone records, everything. She walked in, her cheerful greeting fading as she saw what was waiting for her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. For the first time, Selena looked truly afraid. She glanced at the table, then back at me. "Daniel, I can explain," she started, but I held up my hand. "No more lies," I said firmly. "No more excuses. This is over." Her eyes filled with tears as she realized there was no way out, no way to spin the truth. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of control, a sense that justice was finally being served. But confronting Selena was only the beginning. The road ahead was long, and the fallout of her actions was about to unfold in ways neither of us could have predicted. The next step was initiating the divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the only choice that made sense. Selena's betrayal had destroyed the foundation of our marriage, and there was no rebuilding it. My lawyer filed the papers, citing infidelity with evidence attached, evidence that left no room for argument. When Selena received the documents, her reaction was a mix of anger and desperation. "You're really doing this?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "What about Ethan? What about everything we've built together?" Her words might have moved me once, but not anymore. "You should have thought about that before," I said. "This isn't about what you want anymore. It's about what's best for Ethan, and what's best for me." Selena tried to fight back, of course. She hired a lawyer and attempted to paint herself as a victim, a woman who had made a mistake but was willing to do whatever it took to save her family. But the evidence was overwhelming. The photos, the messages, the financial records showing how she had used joint funds to support her secret rendezvous, it all came together to tell a story she couldn't refute. The court proceedings were grueling, stretching over several months. Selena pleaded for shared custody of Ethan, claiming she was still a devoted mother despite her mistakes. But I knew better. A devoted mother doesn't jeopardize her child's home and security for an affair. My lawyer presented a strong case, highlighting how her actions had not only hurt me but also affected Ethan's well-being. When the ruling finally came, it was exactly what I had hoped for. I was granted full custody of Ethan, along with the majority of our shared assets. Selena was ordered to pay child support, a financial reminder of the life she had chosen to leave behind. She looked devastated as the judge read the decision, but I felt no sympathy. This wasn't about punishment, it was about justice. About ensuring that Ethan and I could move forward without her lies weighing us down. But the divorce wasn't the only consequence Selena had to face. Remember the evidence I had compiled? I didn't release it to the public during the court proceedings, I wanted to give her a chance to take accountability privately. But when she started spreading rumors, trying to paint me as the villain, I knew it was time to set the record straight. I shared the evidence with a few trusted friends and family members, people who had started to question my side of the story because of Selena's lies. The truth spread quickly, and soon, Selena found herself facing not just my anger but the judgment of the very community she had worked so hard to impress. Her social circle began to shrink, her reputation tarnished by her own actions. At work, things weren't much better for her. Her nonprofit, which had relied heavily on her image as a devoted wife and mother, started to distance itself. Donations dwindled, and her colleagues began treating her differently. It wasn't long before she stepped down, citing personal reasons. But everyone knew the truth. Her choices had consequences, and she was finally feeling the full weight of them. Ethan and I, meanwhile, began rebuilding our lives. It wasn't easy. There were nights when he cried, asking why his mom wasn't living with us anymore. I told him the truth, as gently as I could. Sometimes, people make bad choices, buddy. But that doesn't mean they don't love you. It was a delicate balance, protecting him from the worst of it while still being honest enough to help him understand. Over time, the pain began to fade. Ethan and I developed new routines, filling our days with soccer practices, movie nights, and quiet evenings where we just talked. He became my anchor, and I became his. Together, we found a way to move forward, leaving the past behind us. As for Selena, I heard bits and pieces about her life from mutual friends. She moved in with Mike, but their relationship didn't last long. I wasn't surprised. A relationship built on lies rarely has a strong foundation. I didn't feel joy at her misfortune, just a sense of closure. She had made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. In the end, my revenge wasn't about hurting Selena. It was about reclaiming my life, about protecting Ethan and ensuring that we could move forward without the shadow of her betrayal hanging over us. And as I sat in the quiet of our new home, watching Ethan laugh as he played with his dog, I realized that I had done just that. I'll never forget the pain of those months, the heartbreak of discovering the truth about the woman I once loved. But I've learned that even in the darkest times, there's a way forward. There's strength in standing up for yourself, in fighting for what you deserve. And there's peace in knowing that, no matter what, you did what was right, for yourself and for the people who matter most. Life didn't magically become perfect after the divorce. Healing takes time, and there were days when the weight of everything felt almost too much to bear. But slowly, piece by piece, Ethan and I began to rebuild our lives. I started focusing on the little things, getting up early to make Ethan breakfast before school, taking him to his soccer games on weekends, and just being present for him in a way I hadn't always been able to before. Those moments became my anchor, reminders that even though life had changed, there was still so much to be grateful for. One of the first big steps was finding a new home. The house Selena and I had shared was filled with memories, both good and bad, and staying there felt like clinging to a past that no longer existed. Ethan and I found a smaller, cozier place across town. It wasn't as grand, but it was ours. A fresh start, free from the shadows of what had been. Moving day was bittersweet. As I packed up the last box, I found an old photo of the three of us, me, Selena, and Ethan, smiling at the beach on a family vacation. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness, a longing for the life I thought we had. But then I looked at Ethan, who was busy unpacking his soccer trophies in the new house, and I realized something important: the past didn't define us. What mattered was the future we were building together. Ethan adjusted to the changes better than I expected. Kids are resilient in ways we sometimes underestimate. He still saw Selena occasionally, though their relationship was strained. I encouraged him to maintain a connection with her. After all, she was still his mother. But he was old enough to understand that some wounds take time to heal, and he made his own boundaries clear. As for me, I took time to focus on myself for the first time in years. I picked up old hobbies I'd long forgotten: painting, hiking, even learning to cook more than just the basics. It was strange at first, rediscovering who I was outside of being a husband. But it was also liberating. I started to realize that the person I had lost most during my marriage wasn't Selena, it was me. There were moments of doubt, of course. Times when I wondered if I had done the right thing, if there had been some way to save what we had. But those moments were fleeting, drowned out by the quiet strength I found in moving forward. Life isn't about avoiding pain, it's about learning from it, growing through it, and finding the courage to let go of what no longer serves you. In time, I opened myself up to the idea of love again. Not in a rushed, desperate way, but slowly, cautiously, with the understanding that trust isn't something you give away freely, it's something you build, brick by brick. I met someone who understood that, someone who saw me for who I was, scars and all. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. Looking back now, I see the experience not just as an end but as a beginning. It taught me lessons I didn't know I needed, about trust, resilience, and the importance of valuing yourself enough to walk away when someone doesn't. Selena's betrayal was painful, yes, but it also gave me the opportunity to rebuild, to grow, and to create a life that truly reflected who I wanted to be. And so, I leave you with this: life is full of unexpected challenges, moments that test you in ways you never imagined. But those moments don't have to define you. It's what you choose to do after, how you choose to move forward, that truly matters. For me, the choice was simple: to fight for myself, for my son, and for the life we deserved. This was my story, a journey of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately, redemption. But now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever faced a betrayal like this? What would you have done in my shoes? Please share your thoughts in the comments, I'll be reading them all. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Wild Love Story. Turn on notifications so you never miss another incredible tale of love, loss, and the strength to overcome. Thank you for listening, and remember, no matter how dark things may seem, there's always a way forward.